So yeah, we're in week 6, which is all about looking at specialization for an CMALT ePortfolio. So on the WordPress site, cmalt.wordpress.com, just posted and updated this morning an outline of what does choosing a specialization look like, what's it all about. So also put in just a reminder that there's now 3 levels of CMALT. So I know some people have sort of been a little bit perhaps daunted by some of the level of perhaps critique, evidence, etc. Needed in a portfolio. But just to remind people that there are 3 levels of CMALT. So there's associate now, which is targeted, as they say there, at perhaps early career or people with less experience of integrating learning technology into their practice. And then there's the standard CMALT pathway, which is someone with a bit more experience, say 3 years or more, engaging with learning technology, basically throughout most of aspects of your teaching and learning practice. And now there's also a third higher level, so you can go beyond that to senior CMALT if you've got experience and evidence of significant leadership, research, having a wider impact from your practice, etc. So Raj has just raised his hand.
Yes. So Tom, for example, let's assume someone submits a CMALT and the assessors realize that, well, it's fits slightly more towards associate CMALT. So will they be automatically given that, or it won't work that way? It'll be category specific.
I think the assessors would probably suggest to someone if they thought that it wasn't at the right level for their portfolio. And if they thought perhaps it was more better towards an associate, then hopefully they would suggest that. If they thought it was more better towards a senior, then hopefully they would suggest that as well.
Okay.
But yeah, good point. But part of the key here as well is that one of the key foundations of CMALT portfolio is that you need to keep it current. You need to update it every 3 years, which is not a complete rewrite. It's just an update. So it may just be a sentence, a paragraph at the start of each section saying what you've done in the last 3 years and reflecting on that. But it does also give you the opportunity to step up between the levels as well, if you have enough evidence to be able to show that and be able to reflect at that sort of level. So certainly for myself, I went from a CMALT to a senior, although I guess my portfolio was probably at the top end of the CMALT section anyway, because having 20 years or so of experience. But someone like Lindsay would probably be very much in that boat as well. So whether you're aiming for CMALT or looking straight at senior, or if you want to scaffold that over a 3-year period, you have that sort of opportunity to do that. So yeah, just reminding people about the 3 levels. And
so Tom, just on that,
yeah, Sandy.
The reverse of what Raj says, if they think that if you apply for CMALT and they think you're actually equivalent to senior, would they actually come back and say, look, with the if you add in the extra criteria that are needed, you could potentially get senior?
I guess it really just depends on who the reviewers are as to what sort of feedback you're going to get. I guess you would hope that would be the case. It is a peer review process, so it really just depends on the feedback you get from your reviewers, as any peer review.
Yep.
But yeah, that is the other key thing that you pointed out, Sandy. So if I skip down here, I've just taken out of the guideline PDF, just a bit of a snapshot. I'll just zoom and make it slightly easier. A page around what are the difference between the 3 portfolios, and there's obviously more that's involved in a CMALT portfolio than an associate, and then the senior has added in a couple of extra areas. So to go between the 3, you need to sort of add those areas into your portfolio as well. So I think the ideas around perhaps policy and strategy were kind of freaking some people out, but as you see here, the policy section and standards is not actually required for an associate CMALT portfolio. but does for a CMALT and senior. And vice versa, perhaps the idea of supporting the deployment of learning technologies, perhaps you've got some experience in your own practice, but not necessarily in supporting other people and going beyond your own practice, then that's an area you don't need for associate as such. So once again, that's something that's important when you're looking at CMALT, full CMALT or senior, is how are you supporting beyond your own practice? And perhaps in senior, it's going to the level of possibly national or international, impact and support as well. So looking at today, the specialist area, as you can see, it's not actually required for the associate portfolio at all. So you don't have to be or show specific areas of specialization for an associate portfolio. So that makes it a fair bit easier. And for a standard CMALT, you need to provide evidence of one area of specialization. So you might say, hey, I'm a specialist in mobile learning, Stuart in virtual reality, or something like that. Raj in lecturer created videos, etc. Neil might be in supporting language learning. So you sort of think through what's your specialist area, and then for senior, you need to explore two areas. They might be quite related, but they need to be two different specializations. So I guess, for example, for mine, I chose mobile learning as my specialization because that's kind of my research area. And then the second was really supporting a research network, a wider research network around technology enhanced learning. And then the other area that's different as well, which is really just for the advanced, for the senior, is having an advanced area, which is showing evidence of going beyond just your own practice and the impact of it at a much bigger scale. So that's kind of your advanced area. So looking at specialization, it's really something that's kind of what's unique to you. What's kind of the edge that you add to technology enhanced learning? Maybe you're part of a learning management support team, but what is your area that is unique that you bring to that team? So I thought it might be useful maybe if we just go around and everyone sort of talks about what they think their specializations might be. We can give people some feedback. So I kind of started what first on my screen I've actually got Raj. So Raj, do you want to talk a bit about what your specialization is?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So in my portfolio, I wrote about training, mentoring, and developing others. So which was really interesting because at that stage, I was just finishing up. One of my paper came out about e-mentoring. And we have gone through this 2 years rigorous process of developing this e-mentoring model. So it fit really well because I had a clear evidence of the published paper. I had series of video vlogs which were used as a part of accumulated over 2 years time. And also after e-mentoring, I think there's a second thing which I spoke about, which was TATL, my engagement in Talk About Teaching and Learning workshop, which is associated with HERDSA. So that was happening from the past 2 years as well for me. So these were quite substantial. One of the challenges which I found was to sum these two things up in 500 words. But I had strong evidence. I had letters written from the co-facilitators about my style, my engagement. I had feedback from participants, which was gathered over 2 years' time. So that way it was really strong and I quite enjoyed it.
Great. And I think part of the key as well is sometimes, people have done some really good stuff and have got some great evidence. But what you need to do is actually make really explicit in your portfolio what your input was. So maybe it's been a collaborative project, but just citing the project, you need to go beyond that. You need to say, what was your input into that project? Did you lead the project? Were you one of the core participants? what was, what was your involvement in that? So just, try to be pretty specific on what impact was from your input into the, particularly in the specialization area. So I have seen some portfolios where people have, obviously had some really, really good experience, done some great work, but they've just kind of quoted a project and haven't actually said, what did they do in that project? And that's a little bit difficult for the assessors to sort of say, well, great project, but, what did you do? So, talk about your input into those projects if you're citing sort of a project. Sandy.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one for the last few days, actually. And for the last couple of years, I was, apart from undertaking my normal academic teaching duties, I was working as they call me the digital learning leader within our school. We're no longer in schools. We've gone through academic organisational transformation. So my role was to support academic staff with implementing different teaching technologies into their practice. And I ran a number of workshops within the school and across our division of business. So I'm thinking that's probably where I can sit. I've got some feedback emails, and I've got resources that I developed as evidence. So I think potentially that's probably the area that I can use as evidentiary proof.
Yeah, so you probably, you could talk about how you designed the workshops. Maybe you've got, if there was an event online, you can link to that if it's still active.
Yeah.
Etc. So what were maybe some of the core activities that you developed for that workshop, etc.
Okay.
And what was the outcomes? What was the impact from it?
Yep. All right. Some of them I think I've already incorporated elsewhere. So is that a problem if you've got overlap across sections, or? No,
I think you can link between sections of your portfolio as evidence.
Okay.
So I certainly did that a fair bit, yeah.
Cool.
That's the good thing about having an ePortfolio, is that you can hyperlink between sections,
Yeah.
You don't have to rewrite. Neil.
Well, my specialist area is creating online courses that are uploaded to Udemy. I don't know if you know that platform. So, and the main content of that is videos. So create a bit like Raj, actually creating sort of teacher videos. So, and I've also done some research on how to make videos more engaging to keep students' attention, especially for students that you don't meet face to face, that you only ever, or you don't even see them. They just join the course and hopefully carry on studying by themselves. So how do you make?
You've also done a little bit of publishing around that as well, haven't you? Conference and journal articles.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So that's hopefully that's good enough evidence for that specialism.
Yeah, that sounds good. So next on the screen, I've got Julie.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's pretty clear what my main specialisation is, which is online global collaborative learning. So I think I'm just about to have my first paper published from my PhD through Computers in Education, which is a framework that I've developed, the Online Global Collaborative Learning Framework. And my challenge, of course, is coming from mostly a K-12 background, 30 years in K-12 and now more recently in higher ed. My challenge now is to transfer this into a higher education context. And that's really, yeah, sure, Keith, I'll certainly share it when it's out there. Fingers crossed they accept my revisions. Well, this is painful going through the publication process, isn't it, really? I've got another paper that's been rejected twice because another outcome from my PhD was the global collaborator mindset. So I'm going to try a third time for a Q1 journal for that one, and then drop down to Q2, I guess. I don't know. But so transferring to the higher ed context is now, I'm just working that out, what that will look like and how we can build. I'm going, the position I have at the moment, I'm an associate director, so my director has encouraged me to now write a paper about how I can now transfer this, what that might look like at USQ, and of course being online global collaboration, what that might look like in collaboration with other institutions around the world. So that's what I'm thinking about. So yeah, so that's definitely something that I need to hone in on. So the thing is, you know, I've written 2 books about this. I've written lots of blog posts and lots of other stuff, but it's getting that research-based evidence is really my challenge now, because I have a PhD on this, but I've got to get some academic papers and I've got to do that transference into a higher ed context, I think.
Yeah, it's that getting on that treadmill of publish or die, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, but you know, if you've done the evidence, done the practice, then reflecting on that in a critical paper is not too hard a deal. You know, it's not going to be a theoretical only paper. It's going to be, you know, how does the theory critique what you've done?
Yes. Yeah.
And you know, there's a fair gap in the literature around international collaboration in higher education. Not a lot being written about it.
No, well, there's more in K-12, of course, because the typical sort of global project and that global interaction has happened more in K-12. So the higher ed, of course, the walls are up. This is one of our issues. The barriers to collaboration are great, but you know, you really think that this year, with everything that's happened this year and the move to online learning, that the walls would start coming down. But it's hard work, actually, flattening those walls.
Yeah, I think one of the keys is around money and funding, and you know, so EU projects, they'll fund you know, EU countries, but not other countries, etc. So I guess, you know, from my own experience in global collaboration, it's much easier to look at projects that don't involve funding, because then you take that whole issue out. But then, of course, the institution wants you to be drawing money in, so they're not so interested in the experience. They want the money. So all those sorts of issues around those sorts of projects. Yes,
well, it fundamentally comes down to academic mindset as well, you know, and capability and capacity and opportunity to, you know, can academics co-create courses or subjects with others with other institutions? That's another question as well. So,
well, I think the answer is yes, but it's, why would they? Apart from, you know, them being very magnanimous. Yeah. Hey Keith, so what's your thinking about your specialisation?
Yeah, I'm wrestling with this. But what I would like to do, and I've started doing this. Sorry, my children. What I would like to do as I've been going through this is I've been thinking a lot about the work that I'm doing in course design at the moment, and I think perhaps I could draw on that as an area of specialisation. So I've been responsible for the development and the implementation of a whole new graduate certificate at my institution, funnily enough, around the area of learning design. So I was thinking perhaps that might be something that I could use in this field. Yeah.
Yeah, is there a specific framework or theoretical, you know, basis that you think is relatively unique that you're using?
Well, I've actually come up with my own design principles, and I'm in a similar position to Julie. There's a few papers out there that are going through the peer review process about this, but you know, like design principles about things like experience over expertise, multiple entry and exit points, you know, being close to practice but research informed, all of these kinds of things informed the development and the design of the, you know, and it's not, perhaps not particularly innovative worldwide, but it's quite innovative for our institution, the way we're doing it. So yeah, I think I could make a case and provide evidence that you know, we're doing something a little bit different there. Yeah, it's an area of specialisation.
Yeah, sounds good. Jalal, what were you thinking?
Sorry, got myself off mute now. The two areas that I was thinking were around developing online courses. So I've been involved in that for quite a long period of time. So last week I was, a month ago, selected to by the university to showcase good practice during COVID of teaching online. So it's one of 6 people across the university that was selected. So the videoing of that happened last week, which was quite timely because I can kind of use that as an evidence that's going to go online on the UT web page. So I can link that. But I've been involved in developing engaging online courses. So I think that's one of the areas that I'll look at. So other than that good practice video, I've also been, I've done a number of consultancies across the Pacific to develop online training modules. So I've got that as well. There's a training manual as well, so I can attach that into that. And also I've been our school and faculty teaching and learning leader at the school level and representative at the faculty level. So over the last 3 years, I've been providing mentoring for a number of courses. So I've got evidence around that as well. So I just need to tie that in, you know, and I was thinking about doing some videos with some of the staff members that I've been involved in to see how it's impacted the practice and how things have changed. And I've also been running a network for the Pacific around, it's largely with academics around good online practices. So I'm thinking of bringing that in to that mentoring aspect as well. So
yeah, so it sounds like maybe you, with your specialization, you focus on that context, or perhaps the you know, your input into online learning for the Pacific. So as a specific sort of context.
Right, but I was also wondering, Tom, if I could maybe develop that into that advanced. I'm not sure what I'm applying for at this stage. So because there is some of that wider beyond my university into that Pacific, working with those universities there. And I was just seeing how much evidence I've got to support that if I could be applying for a senior, but I haven't made that decision yet. So as soon as I start writing and kind of putting all of this together, I think I'll be in a clearer frame of mind to see where I sit. Yeah.
And maybe, you know, once you've got a bit of a draft together, you know, get some feedback, and that will help as well.
Yeah.
Mark, how about you?
Well, I've also been wrestling and thinking about this because I've got a page on my blog sort of stuff at the moment that I'm setting up for my portfolio. But my sort of discipline area is sensation and perception, and what I've done in the past is try and move some of those things that are traditionally done in a laboratory into a sort of an online self-experiential type setting, and then get the students to communicate that back via using digital posters and Pecha presentations and that sort of thing. So it's really about, you know, marrying the discipline specific stuff that's, you know, quite exciting and that you know, I'm heavily engaged with how I bring that to the students, and then in a sort of online form, and then also get them to communicate back their findings from short experiments that they might do on themselves or within a small group. So that's where my thinking's going, but I don't know if that's the right sort of feel for it or not.
Certainly sounds interesting. I'm just kind of wondering, as you're talking, whether there's some ethics, consent issues, getting students to experiment on themselves or others. Depends what you're doing, I suppose.
On themselves, providing that not doing anything illegal is quite okay. So you can experiment on yourself without any requirement. I mean, you can certainly apply for ethics, but you don't need human experimentation ethics to perform experimental stuff on yourself. But you know, if we've got a group of students and they're performing stuff on each other, that becomes the grey area. Then it's generally it's generally considered to be low risk, and the sort of activities that they'll be doing are low risk. But yeah, look, I take your point.
Yeah. I'm not saying that you need to apply for the ethics. I'm saying it's probably an area that you should probably discuss and reflect on. In that, that's a bit of a critical reflection is around the ethics involved in this. And how have you approached that? Or, has it been an issue or not? So yeah, just gives you, perhaps a bit of a unique slant on what's different to your approach compared to someone else's, maybe.
Yeah, and I've got some some Escalite conference stuff around those areas as well. So I mean, it's a little old now, but I can update some of that and look for some additional evidence as well.
Sounds good. So next on my screen, I've got Marion.
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Like Keith, I'm also grappling a little bit with this one because I don't necessarily have online expertise. But one of the things that I'm doing or have been doing is design thinking. Mm-hmm. So I've been developing design thinking workshops for teachers. And one of the things that I'm doing this year is to reconceptualize those design thinking workshops online. I'm also developing a series of online microsets, which implements this design thinking principles as well. So I'm trying to marry the two, the design thinking and the online in an online environment, and how that might look like at the moment.
Yeah, so I think that sounds good to me.
My area of specialization.
Yeah. I think that's certainly a rich area, and once again, an area there's probably a significant gap as well. So certainly, as an area of specialization, I think that would be good.
Cool. Thanks.
Stuart, I see you're on your phone now.
Yes, the joys of the NBN not really having much bandwidth minute here for whatever reason. So I think I had a really good introduction to what I'm looking at from a number of people who already talked. So around our virtual reality developments, we're actually doing some collaborative work with other universities in developing virtual extramural work for students. So they go online as groups from probably 5 different universities and doing a collaborative week with probably about 200 to 300 students. So there's publications going in over the next 2 months on that, which is one of the reasons I'm struggling to keep up to date with the CMALT work at the moment is developing all that content and the actual resourcing around that. So there'll be quite a strong evidence base by hopefully early next year, both from student feedback from a human ethics point of view and survey through the students, as well as the design around that process. So I think that would probably hopefully be a good area to put in there.
Yeah, sounds good, and certainly, it's an area that's really needed, particularly in COVID and distancing, and being off campus. How do you do all that in a remote or a virtual mode is certainly an area that people are struggling with. So if you can provide some examples, some design principles, some leadership in the area, that's quite significant.
Yeah, cool.
Claire, last on my screen.
Yes, sorry, same internet thing with more people in the house being online. So I've just got my video off to stay in touch. I think my area, a bit like Stuart, my teaching load is 100% at the moment, and I have fallen behind with some of the things. But I think my area of, can you just get Will to be quiet for a second, Scott? I think my area of specialty is really developing around storytelling and reflective practice, and how we incorporate that into ePortfolio and assessment. And we're starting to redesign all of our assessments within the dental school to be part of ePortfolio. And so it's very much a work in progress. I don't think it's something that I could record right now as my specialty and have a lot of evidence, but I think if I'm going to work on this for a little while I build it, that would be where I could really develop that section.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Are there some theoretical frameworks or literature that you're basing the storytelling approach upon?
So it's really around, following a few people. We've written a book chapter as part of a storytelling in education, and there's some sort of development in storytelling pedagogy, but it's quite, I think it's quite new, and it's hard to find places to publish, and it's hard to find places where storytelling as a student and telling the story of your own learning has been published. There's one of the authors in the book is working as in a medical school, and they're doing a similar thing where they're doing storytelling, sort of ungrading their assessments and allowing the students to self-regulate proof of competency or achievement against their professional competencies throughout the year. And I know that's sort of the way our medicine school here in Melbourne is going as well. So I don't actually have a lot of evidence to go straight to, but I'm thinking that as I develop my assessment reform for next year over the next 3 months, so to implement for 2021, then I hopefully will build that body of evidence and find out where the stuff is located, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just kind of thinking, if you target perhaps the self-regulated learning frameworks or theories, even self-determination through pedagogy. I mean, there's a huge gap there in the literature.
Yes, and we don't do it very well at the moment. I think we do a lot of assessments in our clinical courses where we just assess a particular task that gets ticked off, and it gets
very competency based. Yeah,
it gets archived and then they move on. And what we're really trying to focus on is building blocks where students do assessments that are meaningful, that demonstrate a level of achievement, but that they don't just leave that behind, that then comes with them as they build onto their next level.
Yeah, so building capability and critical thinking, all that is actually there's a real gap, particularly in perhaps contexts like medical education, which you would think that diagnosis, etc., is a critical sort of skill, but most of the activities and assessments are very competency based. Yeah,
I think maybe part of it I keep thinking is related to a lot of the academics in clinical courses being good clinicians and not necessarily being educationalists. And if we can learn more about being good teachers and the principles behind good education, we will be good clinicians as well as good educators, and therefore our design of our assessments can be more innovative and sort of move away from that competency checklist.
Yeah, and the reproducibility, which seems to be very critical in health, isn't it?
Yes.
So getting away from the randomized control trial type of approach to something that's a bit more, a bit more around learning theory. But I think that's where collaboration and creating, a team around what you're doing.
Yes.
Working with people outside of perhaps your own department to form a team to bring the sorts of skills that you need to really make that an innovative approach.
Yes. So I've started that with the ePortfolio, working with people in the graduate school of education, and I'm hoping to make that a bit bigger as well. So I feel like those two things feed into each other, and which, like the ePortfolio is an assessment pedagogy and the storytelling and reflective practice, and it probably will incorporate a bit of all of that.
So just obviously a bit of a quick plug for a CSHE as well around educational research and educational technology research as well. So I'm sure that
I'm meeting Christine this afternoon to talk about ePortfolio. So I am trying to get out of the dental school.
Sounds good. Hey, well, it sounds like everyone's got plenty to work on and getting there, which is great. I just wanted to remind people before we head off around one of the key things when you're doing your CMALT portfolio is really to weave these 4 aspects into each aspect of your portfolio. So, showing a commitment to explore and understand, the interplay between technology and learning, keeping up to date, providing evidence of that. How do you keep up to date? in a really, really rapidly changing field. How do you learn from your colleagues, and what have you learned from your colleagues? So when you're reflecting, perhaps, sort of saying, well, it wasn't all just my work. I actually learned something from, Neil. Neil tweeted this morning a link to a really nice timeline for learning theories, and that was great. And then I tweeted back to him, why don't you post that into the discussion forum for the CMOOC, So sort of reflecting on, it's not just this individual process as well, but what have you learned from your colleagues and what have they learned from you? And that sort of leads into that fourth sort of theme, which is how do you communicate and disseminate effective practice as well. So trying to sort of think of those kind of four themes, I guess, if you're sort of thinking like advanced HE, they're kind of like the core values in a CMALT portfolio that should be woven through your entire portfolio. So just a reminder around that. Hey, well, great to see everyone, and I know everyone's really, really busy, but it'd be nice to see some actual portfolios getting submitted. The next round is the 30th of October, which is racing up really, really quickly, but you don't stress. The next round after that, I think, is the 1st of February, so early next year, which would give you a bit more time to get your portfolio all polished up.
Do we have anyone in the team here, Tom, who is aiming for this round of submission or after this one? Is there anyone who's thinking?
Neil,
you're going October?
Well, I wanted to ask, actually, mine will be a resubmission, and I wondered if resubmissions also have to conform to those deadlines, or you can resubmit kind of like any time.
I think they're pretty much around those timeframes as well, because basically the reviewer pool is very small for CMALT, and so it's just trying to keep a bit of make it manageable for people. I was having a quick scan through the guidelines this morning, and I'm pretty sure that the resubmission is basically the same dates as submitting.
Okay, thanks.
And a similar time frame for feedback, sort of 3 months.
Well, I just have one little suggestion for all of you. I know when we discuss things, each one of you are doing some really amazing stuff, and it looks so fitting well with these criterias. But eventually, it's, as Tom was saying, it's a matter of putting that on the paper and creating the portfolio, which can be a bit of a challenging thing. So maybe think about what works for you, even sparing 15-20 minutes after a meeting or whenever, like once a week, some time dedicated to scribble down some of the things which you are discussing or which you are thinking or which comes to your reflection. I think that will be so helpful eventually, because these things are going to accumulate towards creating a rough first draft, which is so important then to polish. So no matter how busy you are, eventually it'll come down to this point of crafting that portfolio and fine-tuning those things. So doing a little bit of work throughout can be very helpful. And then maybe before, I don't know, sometime toward December or January, if you can block 2-3 days separately, just focusing on that can be an intensive approach towards making sure that you can come very closer to a submission. But different things are going to work for different people. So, but it's really good for you all to start thinking already that if I'm aiming for, say, a February submission, this is how my calendar looks like over the next few months. And I'm going to block this time, whether it's early on during holidays, or this is a time when things are a bit more quieter, and then get it done. So that will really get you across the line.
Yeah, good points, Raj. And I also think if you, like Stuart and Julie, etc., you're writing stuff for journal articles or conference proceedings, sort of think of, maybe an excerpt from that would be great in your portfolio as well. So try to sort of think smarter rather than, having to work harder and see them as separate activities. But if you're publishing around and writing around what you're doing, then how can that be interwoven into your portfolio as well? Hey, well, great to see everyone. Have a good week. We'll catch you again next week. Don't forget to post in the discussion forum at cmaltcmooc.wordpress.com. And if you're on Twitter, then use the CMALT CMOOC hashtag post any resources, etc., feedback, and don't forget to read each other's blogs and give some feedback too. That'd be great. So yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.